I am recording.
Okay.
So why does the CBC not refer to it as a genocide that Israel's committing? You don't appreciate being asked questions?
But no, you're allowed to do what
You're a reporter doesn't appreciate.
I don't appreciate when the public and possibly a viewer I can obtain ask me questions.
Disruptive.
Weird thing to happen. We just did a dive into America, the Trump administration doing cuts to public broadcasting, NPR, PBS, so on and so forth. But I want to take it a bit back home because this is kind of related to it. So the CBC are public broadcaster in name only, as I stated, a loose term, what they consider public broadcasting, why I consider more this space and YouTube and social media content creators, unfortunately, more public broadcaster type than the CBC. But one of their biggest hosts has resigned. The CBC host resigned, saying he could not continue at public broadcaster with integrity. Travis Dhanraj accused the public broadcaster of performative diversity tokenism and a system designed to elevate certain voices and diminish others. Again, really paints the perspective of my argument of saying that these entities, CBC, BBC, PBS, NPR, public broadcasting is really just a label. It's really just a name-only persona to fool people to think that they're getting unbiased results when we know the people that are funding it and the people that are predominantly listening to it is completely skewed. Completely skewed. So, goes on to say, a national CBC host announces resignation from the public broadcaster Monday in a letter alleging that he could not continue to work there with integrity. Travis Dhanraj describes leaving the network where the veteran journalist once hosted his own show. I'm stepping down not by choice, but because the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has made it impossible for me to continue my work with integrity, he wrote. After years of service, most recently as the host of Canada Tonight with Travis Dhanraj, I have been systematically sidelined, retaliated against, and denied the editorial access and institutional support necessary to fulfill my public service role. Dhanraj has spent 20 years in broadcasting with stints at Global and Bell Media. When I joined CBC, I did so with a clear understanding of its mandate and a brief in its importance to Canadian democracy, he wrote. I was told I would be a bold voice in journalism. I took that role seriously. I worked to elevate underrepresented stories, expand political balance, and uphold the journalistic values Canadians expect from their public broadcaster. But according to Dhanraj, what happens behind the scenes at CBC too often contradicts what's shown to the public. He accused the public broadcaster of performative diversity tokenism, a system designed to elevate certain voices and diminish others. Dhanraj's lawyer, Catherine Marshall, said Monday that the CBC did not want him booking conservative voices on his show. So, again, public broadcasting name only, the CBC, really showing its true colors, especially knowing that not only is corporations with a pretty dominant liberal-leaning dissent, but also the government continuing to bail them out at a tune of $1 billion to keep this afloat, is really showing the direction of what this once reprehensible broadcaster, this back in the day when, Peter Mansbridge was the head anchor, CBC actually had some dignity, had some sort of, respect of being a service, being a news outlet. And now it's just become just like any other broadcaster at this point. Because we see it also with CTV, we see it with Global, we see it with City News, we see it all over the place. And you see it a lot in the States. So it's really just highlighting the traditional television sphere showing its true colors. It turned out, to Travis's surprise, that there was a strong editorial decision that he was supposed to promote, Marshall said. Dhanraj is of Caribbean heritage. CBC, when they hired him, thought that they were getting someone who would espouse a certain worldview, Marshall said. I think they looked at him and they looked at the color of his skin and they made some assumptions. Where have we heard this before? Where have we heard this before? Just like every other single corporate entity that promotes diversity and inclusion. Of course we want fair representation. Of course. That's why we have to get so many people of different backgrounds and different ethnicities and religions. We have to get the full perspective. Obviously not with thought. We can't have diversity of thought or opinion. We need them to still be in the same tune. We still don't want them to be corporate stooges, but it's okay because we have a gay character or we have a black character or a Muslim or whatever. This is the whole problem with DEI and why it's ultimately a scam. And it's a scam done by the top down. It's done by people at BlackRock. It's done by people at the World Economic Forum to pose to the general public and fool people to think that they're actually having corporations with diversity. But it's not. Diversity is just a prop. And CBC is showing its colors by this. Marshall is weighing in, making a complaint to the Canadian Human Rights Commission about her client's treatment at the CBC. His allegations would include discrimination, reprisal, and harassment, she said. Dhanraj said he was repeatedly denied access to key newsmakers. Internal bookings and editorial protocols were weaponized to create structural barriers for some while empowering others, particularly a small circle of senior Ottawa-based journalists. Wonder where Rosemary Barton is located. I know she's definitely getting in that tight circle. Dhanraj said when he questioned these imbalances, he was met with silence, resistance, and eventually retaliation. I was fighting for balance and accused of being a crusade. His show, according to Dhanraj, was rebranded, my name removed, my access curtailed, my medical leave was whispered about in the newsroom. Dhanraj claims he got in hot water over his April 2024 post on social media platform now dubbed X about how the top CBC honcho at the time declined an interview request to discuss new budget funding for the public broadcaster. I guess they don't want a journalist who actually has a bit of integrity, has a bit of principle, knows that he is in this business to actually question people. But they don't want him to question people that feed the hand. That he doesn't want him to bite the hand that feeds him. Dhanraj said he was presented with a non-disclosure agreement tied to an investigation about a tweet when the CBC president, Catherine Tate, we know about her. Remember her? Remember she got that huge amount of money to save broadcasting and then took it for herself and bought a penthouse in Paris during the Olympics? Yeah, we want to save the jobs at CBC. We got to save the broadcaster. Just let me buy this expensive, lucrative penthouse so I can look at the Olympics in peace. So I can have another vacation house while the bottom line workers, the camera crew and all that, they suffer. It was designed not to protect privacy, but to sign away my voice. I was refused. I was further marginalized. Marshall said that the CBC wanted him to sign an NDA in exchange for his job. Dhanraj went on leave in July 2024 and returned to full-time hours last December, she said. Within basically the first week of his return, he was immediately retaliated against by the CBC for not signing the NDA. Again, you're talking about a Canadian public broadcaster. Does that sound like does that sound like a public entity to you? Does that sound like your tax dollars hard at work? That someone, a journalist that was willing to actually question budgeting, is supposed to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, keep quiet, keep silent, because, that might question the CBC's funding? He was at the point permanently removed as host of Canada Tonight, and his salary got slashed, and it was evident at that point that he had no future or career at the CBC. According to Dhanraj, these were not isolated actions. They were part of a pattern that sent a clear message. Fall in line or be removed. I stayed as long as I could, but CBC leadership left me with no reasonable path forward. That's taken a real toll on my health, my career, and my trust in an institution I once believed I could help reform from within, Dhanraj wrote. But the greater harm is to the public, a broadcaster that no longer lives up to its mandate, a culture that resists accountability, and a system that punishes those who dare to challenge it. The CBC rejects Dhanraj's claims. So, just like how we covered the report that came out from Leslie Roberts, also saying that the CBC is showing its biased colors and completely just revealing how atrocious it is. This is just another example of this so-called public broadcaster, how it's not designed to help this institution of informing the general public, and why so many people are leaving the CBC. I mean, the average viewer that still watches this broadcaster is in its 70s. These are senior citizens. These are, people that don't want to be informed and rather just have comforting voices. That literally is what's left of the viewership at a once reputable network. And the fact that they're getting a huge lump sum of money that Mark Carney is giving them to the tune of billions of dollars to keep this entity afloat while this is continuing is absurd, because we know it's not about informing the general public. We know it's not about democracy. We know it's not about protecting journalism. We know it's about keeping Canadians complacent and providing propaganda source to the Canadian public from the government and from the other entities that promote them up, which is why calling this a public broadcaster is such an oxymoron. It really is an oxymoron, because if CBC truly was a public broadcaster, if it truly was a public broadcaster by its title, they would be going to the streets of the general public and getting people and saying, hey, we're losing viewership. How can we gain your trust back? They'd be doing polls like that. But instead, they're telling the rest of the people of Canada to go pound sand, shut up, get into line, like us, or you're a traitor to this country. And they're attacking Canadians. They're attacking their own possible viewers, which is why it's become such a farce. So here's an example of it. This is from Yves Engler. He was the man that got arrested in Montreal and has been a predominant voice for Palestine. And I think he's also running in the NDP party. And we should actually look into that. Maybe get him on board for an interview. He confronted one of the CBC hosts. This is Power and Politics host David Cochrane. He says, didn't appreciate my questioning his biased coverage of Israel's slaughter in Gaza. He speed off to the fortress, hosting the Liberal cabinet retreat, and police intercepted to stop the questions. So this is a powerful host of a public broadcaster ignoring the public. This is, again, only by name that the CBC gets the title of a public broadcaster, because what they are is a propagandist tool of the Carney government, the Liberal Party, and the Parliamentarian, and also the corporate entities that also keep them afloat. So watch how a public broadcaster like David Cochran is going to ignore the questions and pleas from a member of the public.
So why does the CBC...
Who are you?
My name's Eve Engler.
Okay, are you recording me?
I am recording.
Okay.
So why does the CBC not refer to it as a genocide that Israel's committing?
I'm working. I'm not. Thanks, man.
But you always, it's always kid gloves, right? It was always kid gloves. The language you use is like the massacre that Hamas committed on October 7th, but you never say the massacre, the slaughter that Israel's committing on a daily basis. Why is that? You're all about power and politics. You're all about asking,
Look, we're covering the story as best we can and as fairly as we can, and that's all I can promise you. Is that, I don't appreciate this, and it's a free country. You can do what you're doing.
You don't appreciate being asked questions?
But no, you're allowed to do what you're doing.
You're a reporter that doesn't appreciate asking questions?
No.
I don't appreciate when the public and possibly a viewer I could obtain ask me questions. Again, that's why the average viewer that still watches the network is, in their 70s on their recliner at home, probably eating their Swanson pre-digested dinners. Like, it literally is an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. The average taxpayer of Canada should be embarrassed by this. You're telling me they're paying money to a public broadcaster, and then when a member of the public goes up to said host of the public broadcaster and asks him a simple question, he cowers and walks away and says, "Oh, we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can. Sorry, I don't appreciate you interrupting me. I don't appreciate the talking of the general public." Again, this is why it's such a loose term. The whole idea of the CBC, PBS, BBC, all these so-called public broadcasters is literally done by name only. It's literally done by name only. If they really cared about the general public, they'd be actually interacting with the general public. That's why, again, I put more value and find more respect for YouTubers and content creators and TikTokers. I consider them more the general public, a public broadcaster entity than the CBC. But of course, the Canadian government that pays them does not see that. That's why Bill C-11, when they claim to be protecting Canadian media, they mean the CBC. They don't mean you. They don't mean me. They don't mean, the people creating content by Canadians, for Canadians, and paid and partly by Canadians. They don't mean that. They mean the CBC. They mean the ones that are programming and propagandizing you on the regular. The so-called public broadcaster. So, table salt reminds us that the Trudeau government wants to nearly double the CBC funding from $1.3 billion to $2.4 billion. That's being done by Mark Carney now. Mark Carney is enhancing the CBC because it's a necessity, he says. It's a necessity. We have too many Canadians watching American content. They're getting Americanized. That's why they're increasing the funding to CBC. They're saying that too many people are getting misinformed by platforms like X or me, a Canadian with a shoestring budget podcast that's reading you Canadian news. Oh my God, how dare I? So 1.3 to 2.4 billion to combat misinformation. This is a full admission that the CBC is the liberal lifeline and preferred propaganda tool paid by you. Paid by you. And you think that with all the money, you think the billions of dollars that the CBC gets, along with all the other advertising dollars, and the billionaire escapade that's also keeping them afloat, you think they'd have better programming? Just saying. You think they would have better opportunities in programming? I mean, the CBC hasn't gotten good ratings since Just for Laughs gags were still on. Or in case of my family used to watch Coronation Street. And I don't even know if it's still on. That's just how long ago that was. But here's the CBC just kind of winking at the fact that they're getting all this funding, but they're not going to change.
The criticism of the company is that it gets $1 billion, $1.5 billion in round numbers and doesn't necessarily deliver the audiences and the service that Canadians want. Your argument is that Canada, on a per capita basis, gets less money than most G7 countries, and you're proposing going from 33 per capita, which is CBC gets now, $33 a year, somewhere close to the average of $62 per capita. What's the amount, and do you really think there's an appetite for that kind of extra spending in this point in time?
Definitely, and I don't think that we should get distracted by the minority of voices who say that the CBC should not exist anymore. In reality, for the past number of years, close to 80% of the Canadian population supports a better CBC. And the investments that I'm proposing are, yes, aiming towards the middle ground of the other G7 countries.
I mean, to even have this discussion on the CBC in hopes that it will defend more money towards them by saying that, yes, 80% of Canadians want a better CBC. That's why you should continue funding us and we're not going to change. Don't actually reform the network. Don't actually do anything for the base of the general public, considering yourself a public broadcaster and all. Don't actually change the network or the principles or values that the CBC once had, but just give us more money. Give us more money. Because let's face it, the other G7 countries, they get more money, their broadcasters. Wow. Like, it's literally mocking you. It's literally, they're laughing at your face right this point.
But it's also
the middle ground between 33 and 62, or $62 per capita, your middle ground?
No, I'm saying that there's a lot of
room there.
There's a lot of room there. What's important is that the CBC gets the public funding it needs to be able to fulfill its mandate and make sure that it's servicing Canadians both in French, English, and 8 Indigenous languages across the country. So it's a large mandate, and the public funding has not increased since the 1990s, even though there's been inflation and the rising cost of production. So I understand that some Canadians are disappointed in what CBC is able to give them. What I'm saying is we need to support our CBC better, because CBC Radio-Canada will never, ever be owned by tech oligarchs, billionaires like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. It will always belong to Canadians. And more than ever, we need it as one of the tools to better defend Canadian sovereignty, our own history, our own culture, our languages, and our right to unbiased information.
Okay.
Sure. Yes, they can wave the finger and get so up in arms, they'll raise the fist about, we'll never surrender to Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. But if Galen Weston, the billionaire that owns Loblaws Incorporated, one of the largest grocers in this country, that also sits on the board of Sick Kids, by the way, fun fact, or the pharmaceutical lobbyists that paid the CBC to propagandize them during COVID and still continue to, or any other entity that pays into this public broadcaster, they don't get angry about that. They don't get angry about that. They don't get angry at those entities. But of course, they'll get angry at Elon Musk. Is it because he's a billionaire and a union buster? No. They're angry at someone like Elon Musk because they allow certain voices on these platforms to misinform people. They're angry that someone like Tucker Carlson is able to put videos on the internet. They're angry that someone like me can host a show like this without going through the gatekeepers of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. That's ultimately what they're saying here. Is they're angry at the fact that they don't have control over the consensus, that with technology, and this is going into a bigger conversation about broadcasting as a whole. And I said this briefly with the PBS NPR stuff. It's not the 70s anymore. It's not the day where everyone got together around the one TV and watched that one show at the certain time and it was a family activity. We have streaming services ever since, PVRs and VCRs, where people were able to record television. It started to go little downhill. The traditional television started to go a bit downhill, but then emerged content creation. And we started to see more and more people going to YouTube, going to Rumble, going to X, going to do podcasting, going to other platforms. And as I state that the CBC, once a public broadcaster, is kind of just lost its credibility as a public broadcaster. And I give that baton to more of these content creators because they actually engage with the general public. They actually want to get the views. They actually want and care about their audience. Now, some podcasters, can argue that they get corporate funding as well, and they sponsor and they push narratives and that too. That's typical. But in comparison with traditional media, in comparison to the CBC and, the fact that they're getting billions of dollars on top of what other funds that they're getting to still do this, and they still cry boo-hoo that, oh my God, they might get scrutinized. Oh my God, people want the CBC to be defunded. It really just shows that the empire media, the traditional television where people, watch the 6 o'clock news and that's what they believe because there was no other alternatives, is over. It's over. Because now we live in a day where, you can watch the news on TV, but I can also pull up my phone. I can also look at other websites. I could see what's happening in real time in places like Ukraine, where I can actually see in detail where the CBC and CTV and Global and all these other networks have deliberately lied to you. And I could do a show like this and show you this content. So that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And for a network like the CBC that, way back in the day, you're talking about maybe over 10 years ago, maybe even longer. At one point, it was a reputable source. I did give credit to the CBC. And, I, graduated from broadcast production. I know the ins and outs of this. I did term papers on the importance of local television. So I understand that, local production, television, these small affiliate networks are highly important in certain areas. I get that. And I support continuation to keep them running. But just the overall consensus of paying billions of dollars for a public broadcaster to just deliberately lie to you, that is just the demise of this. And really, the CBC is killing themselves in this process. The people are leaving the network, not because, Tucker Carlson or Elon Musk, but because the CBC just openly lies to them. And the people are starting to be aware and know better. And it's about time that someone shake the CBC and told them to get better.